Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our comprehensive lecture on supply chain risk management initiatives and control, specifically tailored for the pharmaceutical and medical device sectors. Over this session, we will navigate the intricate landscape of ensuring product quality, regulatory compliance, and ultimately, patient safety, through robust risk management strategies. Our discussion is grounded in the globally recognized International Council for Harmonization (ICH-Q9) Guideline for Quality Risk Management (QRM). This framework provides a systematic, science-based approach to assess, control, communicate, and review risks throughout a product's life cycle. For suppliers, mastering these principles is not merely a matter of good practice, it is a critical requirement for maintaining market access and trust with both regulators, such as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the patients who depend on these life-saving products. We will explore how QRM principles are translated into actionable controls, ensuring the integrity of the entire supply chain, from raw material sourcing to final product distribution. On this slide, we have the roadmap for today's lecture. Our journey begins with foundational concepts, establishing a clear understanding of supply chain risk management, or SCRM, and its vital counterpart, quality risk management, abbreviated as QRM. We will explore how these two disciplines are intrinsically linked, particularly within the highly regulated GXP environments of pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Following this introduction, we will examine the regulatory superstructure that governs these activities. This includes a review of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's FDA expectations, such as the Current Good Manufacturing Practices (CGMP), outlined in 21 CFR Part 211, and the Quality System Regulation (QSR) in 21 CFR Part 820. We will situate these regulations within the global context provided by the International Council for Harmonization (ICH), focusing on the pivotal ICH-Q9 guideline. Next, we will perform a deep dive into the core principles of QRM as defined by ICH-Q9. This is fundamental, as these principles, that risk management should be science-based and commensurate with the level of risk, dictate the philosophy behind every subsequent action. We will then walk through the formal QRM process itself, detailing each stage: risk assessment, which includes identification, analysis, and evaluation; risk control, reduction and acceptance; and the continuous feedback loops of risk communication and review. To make these concepts tangible, we will dedicate significant time to exploring practical risk management tools. We will cover failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA, fault tree analysis, FDA, and hazard analysis and critical control points, HACCP, providing examples of their application in a supplier context. Recognizing the unique challenges of the medical device industry, we will have a special focus on the ISO 14971 standard, the global benchmark for device risk management. Finally, we will apply this knowledge to critical supply chain nodes, discussing risk management in product design, the design transfer process, and the crucial activity of supplier qualification and ongoing monitoring. We will conclude by looking at global harmonization efforts, led by bodies like the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, IMDRF, and consider the future trends shaping supply chain risk management. Ethical considerations. Throughout this lecture, we must remain cognizant of our primary ethical obligation: patient safety. Every risk assessment, control strategy, and communication plan must be executed with unwavering transparency and integrity, ensuring that decisions prioritize patient well-being over commercial interests. Application of knowledge. As a quality assurance professional, you could use this outline to structure a comprehensive audit plan for a new active pharmaceutical ingredient, API supplier. You would begin by assessing their QRM framework, review their use of risk tools like FMEA for their manufacturing process, and verify that their risk controls are aligned with ICH-Q9 principles and CGMP requirements. Let's begin by establishing our foundational terminology: supply chain risk management (SCRM) and quality risk management (QRM). SCRM is a broad, strategic discipline that encompasses the identification, assessment, and mitigation of any potential disruptions or failures across the entire supply chain. This could range from geopolitical instability affecting raw material transport to a supplier's financial insolvency. It is about ensuring business continuity and the consistent flow of goods. Quality risk management, as formally defined by SEHQ 9, is a more focused but deeply integrated discipline. It is a systematic, scientific process specifically concerned with the risks to the quality of the pharmaceutical drug product or medical device. This involves a granular analysis of potential failures that could impact the product's identity, strength, quality, and purity, and by extension, its safety and efficacy for the patient. The critical insight here is the synergy between SCRM and QRM. In the life sciences industry, a supply chain failure is almost always a quality failure. For example, a delay in a temperature-controlled shipment, an SCRM issue, can lead to the degradation of a biologic drug product, a QRM issue, rendering it unsafe and ineffective. Therefore, QRM provides the rigorous, data-driven tools and methodologies required to execute SCRM in a manner that satisfies regulatory expectations and protects public health. You cannot have effective SCRM in our industry without a robust QRM foundation. This leads us to the ultimate objective that unifies both disciplines: patient safety. Every risk model, mitigation plan, and control strategy we implement must ultimately be traceable to its impact on the patient. This is a non-negotiable principle that distinguishes our industry from many others. A defective component in a consumer electronic device is an inconvenience. A defective component in a cardiac pacemaker can be a catastrophe. This patient-centric focus necessitates a fundamental shift in mindset from a reactive to proactive approach. Historically, many organizations managed risk by reacting to failures, investigating customer complaints, analyzing returned products, or responding to recalls. While these activities remain important, the modern regulatory and ethical expectation, championed by SEHQ 9, is to be proactive. This involves using risk assessment tools to anticipate potential failures before they occur and implementing controls to prevent them. It is the difference between firefighting and fire prevention. Ethical considerations. The proactive approach is an ethical mandate. Relying on post-market surveillance to catch quality issues means accepting that some patients may be exposed to substandard or unsafe products. Proactive QRM demonstrates a commitment to preventing patient harm, fostering transparency with regulators, and building long-term public trust. Application of knowledge. Imagine you are a quality manager for a medical device company. A key supplier of a sterile barrier packaging system informs you of a potential change in their raw material sub-supplier. A reactive approach would be to wait and see if any packaging failures are reported. The proactive QRM approach, however, would be to immediately initiate a risk assessment. You would use a tool like FMEA to analyze the potential impact of this change on seal strength, sterility, and material leachables, and then implement necessary validation and testing protocols before the new material is approved for use in your supply chain. To effectively manage risk, we must operate within the established regulatory framework. On this slide, we outline the key authorities and guidelines that form the bedrock of quality and compliance in the pharmaceutical and medical device industries. At the national level in the United States, the primary authority is the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. The FDA's mandate is to protect public health by ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biological products, and medical devices. They achieve this through the establishment and enforcement of a comprehensive set of regulations. For our purposes, two of the most critical are found in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR. 21 CFR Part 211 details the Current Good Manufacturing Practice, or CGMP, requirements for finished pharmaceuticals. This regulation covers everything from facility design and equipment maintenance to production processes and laboratory controls. Similarly, 21 CFR Part 820, known as the Quality System Regulation or QSR, sets forth the equivalent requirements for medical device manufacturers. A deep understanding of these regulations is essential for any supplier operating in the U.S. market. However, our industry is global. To prevent a fractured and inefficient system where every country has different technical requirements, the International Council for Harmonization, or ICH, was formed. The ICH brings together regulatory authorities and pharmaceutical industry experts to discuss scientific and technical aspects of drug registration. Its mission is to achieve greater harmonization worldwide to ensure that safe, effective, and high-quality medicines are developed and registered in the most resource-efficient manner. While ICH guidelines are not legally binding regulations in themselves, they are adopted by member regulatory bodies, like the FDA, and thus become enforceable expectations. Within the ICH portfolio, the Q trio of quality guidelines forms a powerful, integrated framework. ICH Q8, on pharmaceutical development, promotes a more systematic, science-based approach to product development, introducing concepts like quality by design, QBD, and design space. ICH Q10 describes a model for a pharmaceutical quality system that can be implemented throughout the different stages of a product life cycle. And at the heart of it all is ICH Q9, our focus today, which provides the principles and tools for quality risk management. These three guidelines are designed to work together. QRM, Q9, is used within the development process. Q8 and is an integral enabler of an effective pharmaceutical quality system. Q10, ethical considerations. Adherence to these regulations is not simply a bureaucratic exercise, it is the mechanism by which we fulfill our ethical duty to the public. Bypassing a CGMP requirement or ignoring an ICH guideline can have direct and severe consequences for patient health. Transparent and diligent compliance is a cornerstone of ethical conduct in our field. Application of knowledge. As a regulatory affairs specialist working with a medical device supplier, you might be tasked with preparing for an FDA inspection. You would use 21 CFR Part 820 as your checklist to conduct a gap analysis of your company's quality system. Furthermore, you would cross-reference your risk management files against the principles of ICH Q9 and the specific requirements of ISO 14971 to demonstrate to an inspector that your approach to risk is both compliant and based on global best practices. Now we arrive at the philosophical core of modern quality risk management, as articulated in ICH Q9. This guideline is built upon two fundamental principles that should guide every risk-related activity. The first principle states that our evaluation of risk must be grounded in science and directly connected to patient protection. This moves us away from subjective, gut feel decisions. When we assess the risk of, for example, a new impurity in an active pharmaceutical ingredient, API, our analysis should be based on toxicology data, knowledge of the manufacturing process, and an understanding of the product's clinical application. The ultimate question we must always ask is, what is the potential for this issue to cause harm to the patient? This patient centricity is the anchor for all QRM activities. It ensures that our efforts are focused on what truly matters. The second principle is one of proportionality. It states that the level of effort, formality, and documentation we apply to a risk management process should be commensurate with, or appropriate to, the level of risk. This is a crucial concept for efficiency and effectiveness. Not all risks are created equal. The risk of a typographical error on a shipping carton warrants a different level of response than the risk of microbial contamination in an injectable drug product. For a low-risk issue, a simple documented discussion might suffice. For a high-risk issue, a full-scale, formal risk assessment using a tool like FMEA, involving a cross-functional team and extensive documentation, is required. This principle prevents analysis paralysis for minor issues while ensuring that significant threats receive the rigorous attention they deserve. These principles together demand objectivity. Decisions must be based on data and scientific rationale, and the entire process must be documented so it can be reviewed and defended during a regulatory inspection. Furthermore, QRM is not a static, one-time event. It is a life cycle approach. As we gain more knowledge about a product or process, as new technologies emerge, or as post-market data becomes available, our risk assessments must be revisited and updated. Let's consider the case study on this slide. A change in the packaging supplier for a sterile surgical kit represents a potentially high risk. A breach in sterility could lead to severe patient infection. Therefore, adhering to Principle 1, the risk assessment must be based on scientific data, material compatibility studies, bioburden testing, and an analysis of the new supplier's sterilization validation data. Adhering to Principle 2, this cannot be an informal decision. It requires a formal, documented FMEA to systematically evaluate all potential failure modes. The outcome is a risk-based decision to implement a more stringent validation protocol, directly linking the QRM activity to the protection of the patient. Ethical considerations. The second principle has an ethical dimension. Intentionally treating a higher risk with low formality to save time or resources is an ethical breach. It represents a willful disregard for potential patient harm and undermines the integrity of the quality system. Application of knowledge. As a process engineer, you might identify a minor drift in a tablet press's compression force, which is still well within validated limits. Applying Principle 2, you would document the observation and increase monitoring frequency, a low-formality action for a low-level risk. In contrast, if you discovered an out-of-specification result for a critical quality attribute, you would immediately escalate the issue, triggering a formal, high-documentation investigation, CAPA, with a full risk assessment, as the potential risk to the patient is significant. This slide provides a high-level schematic of the formal quality risk management process, as outlined in ICHQ 9. This is a structured and iterative methodology designed to ensure that risks are managed in a consistent and comprehensive manner. The process begins with its initiation. This is a critical first step where we clearly define the problem or question at hand. What is the scope of our risk assessment? Are we evaluating a new supplier, a process change, or an unexpected deviation? A well-defined scope prevents the assessment from becoming unfocused and ensures that the team has a clear objective. This stage also involves gathering background information and identifying the necessary resources and team members. Next, we move into the core activity of risk assessment. This is a three-part exercise. First is risk identification, a systematic process to brainstorm potential hazards and failure modes. We ask the fundamental question, what might go wrong? This can be done using historical data, theoretical analysis, or expert opinion. Once potential risks are identified, we perform risk analysis. Here, we estimate the risk associated with each hazard. This typically involves evaluating two key factors: the probability or likelihood of the failure occurring, and the severity of the potential harm if it does occur. Some methodologies also include a third factor, deductibility. Finally, in risk evaluation, we compare the analyzed risk against established risk criteria. This is the decision point where we ask, is this level of risk acceptable? The criteria for acceptance must be predefined and justified. If a risk is deemed unacceptable, we proceed to risk control. The primary goal here is risk reduction. We identify and implement mitigation strategies or controls to lower the risk to an acceptable level. This could involve changing a process, adding an inspection step, or redesigning a component. After controls are implemented, we reassess the risk to determine the remaining, or residual, risk. This leads to risk acceptance, which is the formal decision to accept the residual risk. It is a critical understanding that risk can often be mitigated but rarely eliminated entirely. Finally, the entire process is supported by two ongoing activities. Risk communication is the continuous and interactive process of sharing information about risk between the decision makers and other stakeholders. This is vital for transparency and ensuring that everyone, from operators on the manufacturing floor to senior management, understands the risks and their controls. The second is risk review, which involves the ongoing monitoring of the risk landscape. This is the feedback loop of the QRM system. We review the effectiveness of our controls, monitor for new risks, and ensure that our risk assessments remain current and relevant. This review can be part of planned events, like an annual product review, or triggered by unexpected events, like a product complaint. Ethical considerations. Transparency in risk communication is paramount. Hiding or downplaying a known risk to internal or external stakeholders, including regulators, is a significant ethical violation that can erode trust and endanger patients. Application of knowledge. As a quality systems manager, you could use this process flow chart to create a standard operating procedure, SOP, for risk management at your facility. The SOP would define the triggers for initiating the process, specify the tools to be used for assessment, like FMEA, set the criteria for risk acceptability, and establish the frequency and responsibilities for risk review, thereby embedding the ICH-Q9 methodology into your organization's daily operations. As we conclude today's lecture, let's crystallize the most critical concepts we have discussed. This summary slide encapsulates the key takeaways that should form the foundation of your approach to supply chain and quality risk management. First and foremost, we established that supply chain risk management (SCRM) and quality risk management (QRM) are not separate silos but are deeply interconnected and synergistic disciplines. In our industry, a disruption in the supply chain almost invariably carries a quality implication. Therefore, a robust QRM program is the engine that drives effective SCRM, ensuring that decisions are made with patient safety and product quality at the forefront. We identified the ICH-Q9 guideline as the global benchmark for QRM. It provides a structured, systematic, and science-based process that moves us away from reactive, ad hoc problem solving towards a proactive and predictive state of control. Mastering the ICH-Q9 process, from assessment through control to review, is a core competency for any quality professional. We also situated these practices within the broader regulatory context. Compliance with FDA regulations like Current Good Manufacturing Practices, CGMP, and the Quality System Regulation, QSR, is an absolute requirement for market participation. We have seen how a well-implemented QRM system is not an additional burden but is, in fact, a powerful enabler of sustained regulatory compliance, providing the documented, risk-based justifications that inspectors expect to see. The two core principles of ICH-Q9 are worth repeating. Risk management must be based on scientific knowledge linked to patient protection, and its formality must be commensurate with the level of risk. This philosophy ensures that our resources are focused where they are needed most and that our decisions are objective and defensible. Throughout the lecture, we've explored how these principles are put into practice using tangible tools like failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA, and through adherence to specific standards such as ISO 14971 for medical devices. These are the instruments through which we translate risk management theory into concrete actions that protect patients. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, remember that risk management is not a project with a start and end date. It is a continuous, dynamic, life cycle activity. The risks we face today will evolve tomorrow. Therefore, our systems must be built on a foundation of continuous monitoring, periodic review, and transparent communication to remain effective. This vigilance is our ultimate responsibility to the patients who rely on the safety and efficacy of our products. Application of knowledge. I encourage you to return to your roles and critically evaluate one specific process within your purview. Ask yourself, is our approach to risk in this area proactive or reactive? Are our decisions documented and based on data? Is the level of effort we are applying appropriate for the level of risk involved? By asking these questions, you begin the process of internalizing and applying the principles we've discussed today, driving meaningful improvement within your organization. This final slide provides a list of core references and suggestions for further reading. These documents represent the authoritative sources for the concepts we have covered today. The first, and most important, is the ICH-Q9 guideline itself. This is the foundational document for quality risk management in the pharmaceutical sector. I strongly encourage you all to read it in its entirety. It is a remarkably clear and concise document that lays out the principles, process, and potential tools for QRM. The second reference is the FDA's guidance document on Q9. This publication officially signals the FDA's adoption of the ICH guideline and provides the agency's perspective on its implementation. It is a critical read for understanding how U.S. regulators will interpret and enforce these principles during inspections. For those of you focused on medical devices, the ISO 14971 standard is the essential, globally recognized document for risk management. While it shares the same core principles as ICH-Q9, it is specifically tailored to the life cycle of a medical device and is a mandatory compliance requirement in most major markets, including the US and Europe. To broaden your perspective on the strategic aspects of supply chain management, Chopra and Meindl's textbook is a classic and highly respected resource. While not exclusively focused on the pharmaceutical industry, it provides excellent frameworks for understanding supply chain design, forecasting, and managing uncertainty, which are directly applicable to our field. Finally, for a practical, hands-on guide, James Vesper's book on risk management is an excellent resource. It translates the high-level principles of the guidelines into actionable steps and provides many useful examples and templates that can be adapted for your own organization's QRM program. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this lecture has provided you with a robust framework for managing risk within your supply chains, and I am now happy to take any questions you may have.